Now, we will start our last session. Please welcome the moderator of this session, Professor Jeon Bong-kun, Professor of the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Jeon, now the floor is yours.
예, IFANS 시그니처 컨퍼런스의 제3세션
I am honored to moderate the third session on the issue of Korean Peninsula and international cooperation. My name is Jeon Bong-kun. I am a professor at the KNDA. I am delighted to have you all at the signature conference of KNDA and moderate the session. Today, we will dedicate the session on Korea's foreign policy and international cooperation, and we will discuss diverse issues, including the North Korean issue and the political landscape on the Korean Peninsula, and the South Korean government's response to North Korea, together with the renowned experts.
오늘 세션의 구성을 보니
And when I looked at the structure of the session,
한국의 그
I thought that
국가적 정체성이 무엇인가? 라고 했을 때 저는 크게 이제 세
I
가지가 있다고
thought of
보겠습니다.
one question. What is Korea's national identity? There are three identities that Korea has. First is that Korea is a middle power amidst strong powers. And secondly, Korea is a country that must rely on trade because it lacks resources, natural resources. So against that backdrop, the first session was dedicated to Korea's position amongst the strong powers, especially focusing on the U.S. and China rivalry. And during the second session, you discussed the economic matters.
분단 국가입니다.
And the third identity that Korea has is that it is a divided country, and there are a lot of different issues that belong to a divided country. And today we also are faced with the North nuclear issue. Against this backdrop, we are having this third session, which is the most significant issue for the South Korean government.
저도 한반도 문제를 논의하면서
And whenever I discuss the issue of the Korean Peninsula, it's always difficult to foresee what's going to happen tomorrow. At KNDA and other professional and expert organizations have conferences as such at the end of the year to forecast what's going to happen in the next year. And in fact, several days ago, I submitted a paper on my prospects or on my views on the prospects of the Korean Peninsula for the next year. But I think I am halfway right and halfway wrong. This is because we are in a very uncertain region. And it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the future. And that is why we have to gather different experts together in order to discuss and seek the ways of resolving the issue on the region. So that is why we have 4 experts here with us today.
외교안보 그리고 북한 분야에서 거의 최고 전문가로서
We have the best
활동하고
experts in terms
계시는
of the foreign policy and North Korean issues.
한번 간단히 소개를
Let me
하고
briefly introduce
저희들이
each and every one of them, and then we will delve into the topic.
전영희 지금 화면상으로 연결되어
First of all, we have one participant that is online.
평화기획단장님께서 연결되어
Mr.
있습니다.
Jeon Yogi is here with us.
평화기획단장님은
He is
외교
the
비서관실
peace
대통령실의 외교 비서관실에 근무하시고
group
그리고
leader, and
북미관계
he is the expert in the area of U.S. North Korean issues, and he also worked in Russia and New York. And today, in fact, we were supposed to invite Mr. Kim Gon, Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, MOFA. He is in charge of the Korean Peninsula and the North Korean issues here in Korea. But as you know, due to the recent launching of North Korea the missiles, there is an urgent meeting going on in the government. So that is why he had to excuse himself and not participate in our conference. But
전영희,
so we instead invited
평화기획단장님께서
Mr. Chun Young-gi,
연결을 해서 말씀을
who is
해주시겠습니다.
online and who will
그리고
also
다음
participate
우리
in the
홍양호
discussion.
전 통일부
And
차관님을
next, we
소개합니다.
also have Mr. Hong Yang-ho, former Vice Minister of
홍양호
Unification
차관님은
of the
통일부
Republic of Korea.
기획관리실장 그리고 경수로 지원단 정책조정부장
He
등등을
has
역임을
worked
하셨고요.
in different
그리고
organizations
차관의
of the
임무를
Korean
통일부
administration,
30년 이상
and
근무를
he has worked more than 30
계속해서
years in the
노력하고
government,
있습니다.
and he is
그래서
even
관련
now
업무를
dealing with
보면은
the Korean
대성공단
Peninsula-related issues. And in particular, he was in the
지원재단 이사장.
he worked in the foundation that supports the Kaesong Industrial Complex, and he also worked at the Kaesong Industrial District Foundation, and also he's a member of the Korean delegation of the German-Korean Unification Consultation Committee, and also the chairman of the Inter-Korean Political Dialogue of the National Unification Advisory Council. And also we also have Mr. Chun Young-woo, who is the founder of the Korean Peninsula Future Forum, and before that he worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 30 years.
제2차관 그리고 주영대사
He
그리고
worked
대통령
as
비서실의
the National Security
외교부 수석-
Advisor to
수석을-
President
수석직을
Lee,
맡으셨습니다.
and
그리고 외교관 중에서도
among
핵문제,
the
비약산,
diplomats,
한반도 문제에 대한
he is an
최고
expert
전문가로 알려져 있습니다.
in the issue of the Korean Peninsula.
유호열
And next,
고려대학교
we have
명예
Mr.
교수님을
Yoo
소개합니다.
Ho-yeol, Professor Emeritus of Korea University.
유호열 교수님은 통일연구원에서도
Professor
오래 재직을
Yoo
하시고
Ho-yeol
그 이후에
has
고려대학교
worked at the
통일
Unification Research
외교학부
Institute,
교수님으로 활동을
and
하셨습니다.
he
그리고
also
고려대학교에서는
has taught
행정대학
at Korea
원장님도
University. He
하시고요.
has
그리고 학위
been
활동도
responsible
열심히
for teaching
하셔가지고
undergraduate and
북한
graduate
연구
students on
학회장,
inter-Korean relations,
한국정치학회장도
and he
하셨습니다.
served as the
그리고
research fellow at the
정부의
Korean Institute for
직책으로는
National Unification.
민주평통의 수석 부의장도
And
박근혜 대통령 시절에
during the
역임을
Park Geun-hye
하셨습니다.
administration, he
또,
also
우리
worked as the
학계에서의
vice
대북
chairperson of the
정책에
National
대한
Unification Advisory
노동을
Council for the
조언을
Republic of
해주실
Korea.
것으로
So I believe that he will make very precious advices
그러면은
on
저희들이
the issue of the Korean Peninsula.
오늘 네 분의
So we will take
참석자를
turns
모셔서
now with the
모두
four
바로 오프닝 리마크스를
panelists.
한 7분
So
정도
I would like to ask each
듣도록
panelist to
하겠습니다.
give opening
그전에
remarks
제가
for about
간단히
10
한국어의
minutes. And before
우리
that,
오늘의 주요 주제인
I
한국
would
정부의
like
정부의
to
audacious initiative와 우리의 대북 정책에
focus
관한
on the
점에서
audacious
우리 정부의
initiative of the Korean
정책과 그리고
government.
우리가
I would like to
처한 상황을 아주
elaborate
간단히
on
말해서
the Korean
소개를
government
해드립니다.
stance and
이미
also
잘
on the current
아시다시피,
status that we are
우리
in.
정부의 대북 정책
As you are
구성은
well
크게
aware,
두
the
가지로
Korean
알려져
government's
있습니다.
North Korean
하나는
policy is
구상,
divided into two
그리고
parts.
하나는
First is the
3D
audacious
정책입니다.
initiative,
아마
and the
오늘
second
아침에
is the
우리
3D
박진
policy.
장관께서도 충분히
And
말씀하셨겠습니다만,
Minister Park Jin also mentioned this in the morning. So first D is the deterrence, and the second D is dissuasion, and the third D is the dialogue or diplomacy with North Korea. So these are the three big pillars of the Republic of Korea's North Korean policy. So I believe that we will go into more detail through our discussion. So first, I would like to ask Mr. Chun Young-hee, are you ready to speak? Yes, Mr. Chun Young-hee, please.
네.
The floor is yours.
예, 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Good afternoon, everyone.
외교부 한반도 평화교섭본부 전영희 평화기획.
My name is Chun Young-hee, and I am representing the Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs.
국립외교원에서 행사하는 국제 컨퍼런스에
And it is my honor to take part at the International Conference on Global Affairs.
또 참석하신
Although I'm not
수석님과
there
사관님,
in
그리고
person,
교수님들 만나서 반갑고
and I am happy to see all the distinguished guests, the ministers, vice ministers, and the experts, professors.
좋은 의견도 많이
And
나누시고 또
I've-
좋은 의견도 많이 주시고 하시면 고맙겠습니다.
I'd like to ask all the participants to share your valuable ideas.
주신 대로
And just like Professor Chun mentioned, the North Korean issue isn't an easy issue for us to solve.
그래서 저는 이제
That is
처음에는
why
한반도
in the
정세에 대해서
beginning,
어떻게 평가하는지,
I would like to assess
그다음에
the Korean
교수님
political
간단하게 얘기는
landscape,
하셨지만 우리
and
정부가 지금 추구하는 담대한 구상에 대해서
I would like
좀
to
설명을 드리도록
also talk
하겠습니다.
about the audacious
우선
initiative that's pursued
한반도
by the Korean
정세 평가와
government.
우리
First of
정부의
all,
기본 입장을 좀
the
설명드리겠습니다.
assessment of the
북한의 핵 개발은
political landscape on the Korean
한반도뿐만
Peninsula.
아니라 국제사회의 평화
North Korea
그리고 국제 비확산 체제에 대한 중대한 위협이며
a huge threat to the NPT and also the peace and stability of the global
각종
community.
도발 행위를
And
지속하고 있습니다.
North Korea has been performing different kinds of acts of provocations, just as we saw this morning.
21세기에
North Korea
핵실험을 실시한 유일한
is the
국가로서
only country in the world that has
핵물질 생산을
conducted
지속하고 있고
nuclear tests in the
언제든지
21st century.
핵실험을 감행할 수
And it
있도록 준비된
it
상황입니다.
has been continuing to produce nuclear materials and is also ready to conduct the seventh nuclear tests at any moment.
모라토리움을
Ever since the
파기하고
collapse of the second USDPRK summit in 2019, the North has broken its moratorium
핵 위협을
and has
지속적으로
developed tactical
고조시키고
nuclear
있습니다.
weapons against us, heightening
동시에
nuclear
북한은
threats.
현재
Simultaneously,
미국과
the
중국
North
관계,
has
그리고
been trying to
미국과 러시아
capitalize
간
on the
갈등
international
간의
situation,
국제
such as
정세를
conflicts
자신에게
between the
유리하게
US and China
활용하려는
or
모습을
the
보이고
US
있습니다.
and Russia.
그리고 아시다시피 9월
And as
8일
you know, on the 8th of
북한은
September,
핵무력 정책
the
법제화를
DPRK
시켰는데
legalized
이러한
its
법제화도
nuclear weapons.
이러한 차원에서
Such
이루어지면서
legalization also goes in line
핵무력
with
정책
this.
법령은 선제적
And
핵
this
공격
new
가능성을
law
명시하는
stipulates
등
possibility
핵 사용의
of
문턱을
preemptive
대폭
nuclear
낮추고
strikes,
또 자의적으로
lowering the threshold
핵을
of nuclear
사용하려는
usage,
의도를
and
노골화하고 있습니다.
demonstrates explicit intentions of arbitrary
또한
nuclear use.
북한의 급격한 미사일 개발
In addition,
속도도
the
우려스러운
rapid
부분입니다.
speed of missile development by the North
북한은
is another
6발의
point of concern.
ICBM을 포함하여
DPRK has
올해
launched
6대
a
최다
record
횟수의
number of
탄도
ballistic
미사일을
missiles this year,
발사해오고
including
있습니다.
the six
특히 북한은
ICBMs.
최근
In particular,
김정은의 주관하에
under the leadership
유례없는
of Kim
빈도로
Jong-un,
탄도미사일 발사를
ballistic
감행하는
missiles
등
have been launched in an
위협적인
unprecedented
도발을
interval,
지속해오고
engaging in threatening provocations.
아시다시피 오늘 오전에도
As you know, this morning,
북한은 탄도미사일을
North Korea
발사했습니다.
launched
그리고
missiles
북한의
once
이번
again.
탄도미사일 발사는
And North Korea's
동해
launching
NLL을
of
침범하며
missiles has
속초
invaded
동북방
Korea's
57km 지점
East
우리
Sea
영해인근에
coast.
낙한된 유례없는
And
군사적 도발입니다.
This is a military
이러한
provocation.
도발은 유엔 안보리 결의와
And this
9.19
such
군사
arms
협정을
provocation
위반한
is a
것이고
breach of
또
UN
한반도의
Security Council
평화와 안전을
resolutions
심각하게
and
위협하는
also
행위입니다.
threatens peace and stability of the Korean
어쨌든 우리
Peninsula.
정부를 이런
As you know,
강력히 규탄한 바
the
있습니다.
Korean government is strongly
그리고 10월에
against this.
중국의 제20차 당대회 기간 중에는
And during the
잠시 중단되었던
China's
북한의
20th
이런 탄도미사일 도발이
and during the Chinese
재개된
20th Party Congress, the North
상호도발
temporarily
방향을
halted its
유지하면서
ballistic missile
철저히
provocations.
대비해 나갈 필요가 있습니다.
Now that they are resumed,
우리
it is
정부는
necessary to pay close
국제사회와
attention and
협력하여
thoroughly prepare for any
고도화되는
further provocations.
북한의 핵 그리고 미사일
The Korean
위협에
government is
단호하게
cooperating
대응해
with the
나간다는
international
입장을
society to
견지하고
sternly
있습니다.
respond to the North's missile
북한의 핵
threats.
미사일 개발 의지보다
We must clearly
국제사회의
demonstrate
북한
that the
비핵화
international
의지가
society's
그
determination for the
강하다는
North
점을
denuclearization is
보여줘야 할 것입니다.
stronger than the North's determination for
동시에
nuclear
우리
missiles
정부는
development.
북핵 문제의
At the
평화적
same
해결을
time,
위해
the Korean government will
대화의
leave
문을
doors
항상
open
열어두고
for conversation
담대한
for
구상을
a peaceful
지속 추진해
resolution of the
나갈
North
예정입니다.
nuclear issue, and will continue promoting its
담대한
audacious
구상에
initiative.
대해서 간략히 말씀드리겠습니다.
Let me briefly describe the
지난
audacious
8월
initiative.
윤석열
In
대통령은
August this year,
광복절 경축사를
President
통해
Yoon Suk-yeol, in his
북한이
congratulatory
핵
remarks
개발을
at the
중단하고
National Liberation Day,
실질적인 비핵화로
mentioned that
전환한다면
if the North stops
그
development
단계에
of
맞춰
nuclear weapons
북한의
and
경제와
transitions to actual
민생을 획기적으로
denuclearization,
개선할 수 있는
then
담대한 구상을
South Korea will be
제안하였습니다.
providing the
담대한
support to its
구상은
economy.
북한의 비핵화와
And
우리의
this is
상호
coined
조치를
as
완화한
audacious initiative.
과감하고 균형적인
And this
내용이고
initiative, it is a very
포괄적인
bold
합의
and
조치를
balanced,
모색하는
comprehensive agreement
우리
seeking
정부는
way.
한반도 문제에
The
직접적이고
Korean government
핵심적인
is
당사자로서
the key player
중심적인
and
역할을
direct
수행해
player
나갈 예정입니다.
to solve the Korean Peninsula
그리고
issue
협상
and
타결
will keep
이후에
playing the central role in
협상
this
이행은
process.
단계적으로 이루어질
And
것이고
after reaching an
또
agreement,
북한의 합의
the
사항을 이행하지
realization
않는다면
of the measures will happen
역행하는
in
조치에
phases. And if the
안전장치를
North breaches
마련할
its
계획입니다.
agreements, then we will be responding
담대한
to
구상에
those
대해서
breaches
유정
correspondingly.
구상과는 좀 차별화되는 특징을
And the
판단하는
audacious initiative differentiates itself
아까
from the previous
정
initiatives
교수님이
in three
초기에
ways.
담대한
First of all,
구상과 소위 말하는 3D 전략을 조금 말씀하셨는데
so the moderator
사실은
mentioned the
어떻게
audacious
보면
initiative
3D
and the
전략도
3D
담대한
strategy.
구상 속에
And in a
포함되어
way,
있는
3D
거죠.
strategy
그래서
is a
담대한
part of the
구상은
audacious
북한의
initiative.
협상 복귀가 아닙니다.
Audacious
지금 이
initiative is not
순간부터
about
가담되고 있는
returning
상황
North Korea to
보고
the
있습니다.
negotiation table, but it's
북한이 비핵화
already
협상으로 복귀할
happening
수밖에
even
없는
now.
전략적
It
환경을
is about
조성해
making
나가는
a
것이
strategic environment
담대한 구상의 첫
that
번째 단계입니다.
makes North
그래서
Korea to
이를
return to the
북한
negotiation
핵위협을
for the
억제하고
denuclearization.
디터런스
And this will
그다음에
lead
제재와
to the
압박을 통해서
deterrence of
북한의
North
핵개발을
nuclear threat
단념시키고
and will
그것이
also
되어야
dissuade North Korea
그리고
from
대화와
further
외교를
developing
통해서 북한
nuclear
비핵화를
weapons.
추진해 나간다.
And will
다이얼로그를
it is also
소위
about
말하는
promoting
3D 전략을
denuclearization through
추진해
dialogue
오겠습니다.
and diplomacy. This is
그리고
what 3D
담대한
strategy
구상은
is.
협상 과정의
And the
지속성을 확보하기
audacious
위해서
initiative
포괄적인
will be
합의 도출
preemptively
과정에서
taking
과감한
initial
초기
sets
조치에
of actions
좀 선제적으로
in the
착수할
process
예정입니다.
of reaching a comprehensive agreement in order to
그리고
secure
담대한
the
구상은
sustainability of the
북한의
negotiation
실질적 비핵화
process.
진전에 따라서
If
경제뿐만
the
아니라
North genuinely
정치
returns to the
그리고
dialogue
군사
for
분야를
denuclearization,
모두
then
과감한 상응
we will
조치를
be
제공하게
providing
될
various
것입니다.
supports in
그래서
the
사실은
healthcare and
비핵화
the
이행은
agriculture, and etc.
결국 단계적으로 추진하되
So this is a
이행
plan
단계에서는
that will take place in
실질적인
phases,
비핵화와 그리고 완전한
and
비핵화라는
it will be
두
divided
단계로
into two
최소화하여
phases.
좀
First
신속한
phase is the
비핵화를 추진해
actual
나갈 것입니다.
denuclearization, and the second is the complete denuclearization.
우리 정부의 담대한 구상은
And the
여전히
audacious initiative of the Korean government is still
바탕으로
effective.
북한의
Based
포괄
on the
전략을
audacious
대화
initiative,
복귀를 위한
we will
외교적 노력을
pursuing
흔들림
our
없이
diplomatic
추진해 나갈
endeavors in order
예정입니다.
to stop the North
이러한
provocations
과정에서
and to
굳건한
bring the North
한미연합
back
방위
to the
태세를
dialogue.
유지하고
And in this
주요
process, we
우방국
will be
그리고
maintaining the
국제사회와의
strong
관련 협력을
USA
지속하고
ROC
강화해
combined
나갈
defense posture,
것입니다.
and we will continue to
아울러
strengthen our cooperation
북한의
and
비핵화
partnership
대화
with
복귀를
our
위한
partner countries
중국과
and the
러시아의
international
정상적
society.
역할을
And we will
견인해
also
나가는 노력도 지속 경주해
pay
나갈
attention
것입니다.
to
네, 감사합니다.
lead the Russia's participation to return North Korea to the dialogue. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
전양이
Sir, Mr. Chun Yang-hee
우리 정부의
mentioned
audacious initiative,
the
3D 정치
Korean government's audacious initiative, and he also in much detail explained what the 3D strategy is. I will not reiterate what he has said, but against the backdrop of the urgent situation that the Korean Peninsula is faced, such policy is still effective, and the Korean government's audacious initiative will take more active posture and measures. And the initial sets of actions are being prepared, and the denuclearization of the North Korea will be taking place in two phases. So when we talk in the past, we talked only about the economic aspect of the denuclearization, but in the future, we'll also include the economic and the military support.
그러면 두 번째로
So let's go
홍양호
to the
차관님을 모셔서
next topic.
북한의
I would like to
대남
ask
동향,
Mr. Hong Yang-ho to
그리고
talk
우리
about
정책 등등에 대해서
the
말씀을 듣도록 하겠습니다.
Korean Peninsular political landscape.
저는 이명박 정부 초기에
In the early days of Lee Myung-bak administration, I served as the Vice Minister of Unification.
현황 그리고
I would like to talk about the current political landscape of the inter-Korean relations and the features. I would like to summarize this into two pillars. The first is the inter-Korean relationship is completely disconnected. That is the first feature. And the second is that the inter-Korean relation is going towards the way of strong against strong. After the inter-Korean dialogue in 1970s, there have been many dialogues and efforts, but recently, at the moment, the entire inter-Korean relations have been severed. There's no talks at the government level. There's no exchanges or cooperation at the private level. In the past governments, there have been humanitarian assistance to North Korea, but now, since 2018, the North Korea declined any humanitarian assistance. So everything has been severed in the inter-Korean relations. Up until very recently, at the Panmunjom or the military communication line has been stopped, but very recently the communication has been restored. However, even this communication line, North Korea only accepts the line whenever they feel they see the communication is needed, and when they feel that the communication is not positive, they just simply do not answer. And secondly, of course, there have been the strong versus strong kind of sentiment or the attitude has been witnessed in the past, but not so intensified like today. Then why is this? Structurally, as the development of the North Korean nuclear program continues, and South Korea has no other option to take as a UN member and a member of the international community. All economic exchanges have been stopped. During the Moon Jae-in administration, there have been efforts and there have been economic incentives that were offered to North Korea, but this did not lead to a substantial denuclearization, so all economic cooperation has been severed. No matter which government comes into the office, without substantial denuclearization efforts or developments, the problem will not be solved due to the sanctions by the United Nations and the international community. And secondly, since North Korea is especially worried about their survival of the regime. Especially, they worry about the freedom of South Korea that is actually impacted. That is impacting the youth of North Korea, such as the K-drama or K-culture that is being spread to North Korea. About 2 years ago, as you know, North Korea passed several acts to put priority on the regime survivor first. The Anti-Culture Act is about wording off the cultural import from Japan or Korea. Anyone who distributes the kind of external culture are punished, and anyone who actually enjoys the cultural products are also punished as well. And due to COVID-19, the entire health system of North Korea has gone down. So without this system, North Korea cannot have any interchange with external actors. And due to COVID-19, the cultural and social exchanges have been severed as well. And secondly, other than the structural aspects, North Korea only moves very strategically. There's a big strategy under Kim Jong-un's rule. Under Kim Il-sung's rule or Kim Jong-il's rule, in the Kim Il-sung's rule, there was a big strategy, and under Kim Jong-il, because the economy was so difficult, they were very realistic when it comes to exchanges. They wanted some economic realistic benefits from South Korea. So they were more active and receptive of economic and social exchanges.
사망하면서 김정은이 권력을 받으면서
Kim Jong-il suddenly died, and Kim Jong-un inherited the power. And Kim Jong-un
특히 군사적으로 우위에서야 자기
especially
보존할 수 있다는
saw the need to be on the upper hand militarily.
전략을 추구했습니다.
So they pursued the parallel economy and the military.
핵무력을 건설을 우선적으로 하면서 잘 아시는
It says
2017년
economy first in this name, but actually they put priority in nuclear development. They wanted to become a nuclear state. And the strategy has been completed, they believe, and now they believe that it is the time to focus on economy, so they started all-out economic development. With this complete nuclear program and nuclear arsenal, they can take economic benefits from South Korea. That is their way of overcoming the sanctions. And that kind of worked until the Singapore summit, but during the Hanoi summit, which completely broke apart, they experienced a bitter failure. On the other side of the failure, Kim Jong-un went all the way to Vietnam on a train for 70 hours. And as you know, that it's an autocratic society, and it was a big humiliation in the international community for their autocrat. They now understood that they can no longer get whatever they wanted from South Korea. Now they turn to self-reliance strategy. And for self-reliance, they need to enhance their nuclear development further, up to the point that they can combat deploy their tactical nuclear weapons. And at the 8th Labor Party Congress, they came up with the 5-year plan for the development of the defense science and weapon systems. They decided to enhance their program. So they move only based on their own strategy. They are not swayed by any external forces or external strategy. What about their economy? They recognize that it is hard to overcome their economic difficulty. So they only said that they will enhance and repair whatever they have internally and become self-reliant. So they're not going to move no matter what measures the other parties offer them. And when it comes to their internal structure, since it is a one-person autocracy, there should be no more humiliation for their powerful autocrat. And secondly, North Korea is fundamentally a military power. The loyalty of their military forces is higher than any other country. So they have the tendency to respond to power with even stronger power. So they are accustomed to brinkmanship and responding to power with stronger power. Basically, this kind of strategy and tactics are not going to change, and therefore we won't really see any momentum creating on the Inter-Korean Peninsula in the foreseeable future. Having said that, the Yoon Suk-yeol administration came up with this idea of audacious initiative, and this kind of efforts are something that any democratic government has to pursue, and therefore the government will have to promote this audacious initiative and try to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
현재
Hong.
남북 관계가
The current inter-Korean relations, it's severed completely. In the past, we had some sort of social and cultural exchanges, and there were humanitarian supports. But now we are in the relations are completely severed.
지속되지 않을까.
So as you said, so there is a pessimistic prospect that such status will continue for a while. In particular, after the failure of the Hanoi summit, U.S. and DPRK summit in Hanoi,
새로운 방향을
the North Korea switched its or changed its course of path to a totally new direction. Now, it has a very tense relations or policies towards South Korea. So it will be intensifying in the future. And against this backdrop, the Korean government has the audacious initiative, and the Korean government's 3D strategy should take a more long-term perspective. So then let's move on to Mr. Chun Young-woo.
네, 여러분 반갑습니다.
Nice to meet you all.
북핵 문제,
The North Korean nuclear issue and the DPRK issue,
제가
these are
지난
the
봄에 내놓은 그 대통령의 외교안보 어젠다에 제가 자세히
actual issues
밝혔기
that
때문에
were already covered at the
안보 문제 대부분이
president's
있습니다.
diplomatic
되풀이하는
policy plan. So rather than
오늘의
repeating
주제인
myself,
이
I
담대한
will
구상,
talk about more about the audacious initiative, which is today's topic.
평가를 한번 해보겠습니다.
I would like to assess, evaluate this
저는
policy.
북한이 핵을 포기할 가능성이 거의 없고
I
점점
do not believe that
줄어든다고
there
해서
are potentials or possibilities that the North Korea will give up its nuclear, but against that backdrop,
포기해서는 안 되고
the government should not give up on the Korean government should not give up on its diplomatic efforts. It should nonetheless continue its efforts. That's what I believe. But
우리 국립외교원이나 정부에서는
the KNDA or the government must have a lot of praises about the audacious initiative. So I will not be praising this initiative either. I will just focus more on the things that could or that have some more room for improvement.
좀 이해를 해주시기
So
바랍니다.
please bear with me.
저는 이런 구상을 제시할 때 그 내용이 물론 중요하죠.
Of course,
그렇지만
the contents of the initiatives or the plans are very important, but
국제적인 맥락,
we
컨텍스트,
also have to pay
한반도
close
상황적인
attention to the context,
컨텍스트,
the context of the
시기가
Korean Peninsula.
적절한지,
Also, whether
구상이
this initiative
플라이할
is
것인지,
timely.
플라이하지 못하고 바로 그냥
We also have
수행할
to be
것인지,
concerned whether this
누가
initiative
발표할
can be
것인지,
applied and
그리고
whether
대북 협상력이 어떤
it can be
영향을
applied
미칠
or
것인지,
who will be
이런
announcing
걸
it
좀
and
잘,
who will be and how will this affect
발표해야
the
되고, 이걸 이런
relations
좋은-
with
좋은
North Korea.
구상이라도
I believe that we always have to
발표의
consider
주체가
these
대통령이
things
나서서 발표할
whenever
것인지,
we
아니면
announce
장관이나,
such initiatives. No matter how great an initiative is, you have to think of who will be announcing this, whether it's going to be the president or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or somebody else.
아시는 내용이었지만
So when we look at the contents, I believe that you are all aware of it.
이루어가려면 당연히
In order to advance our progress of denuclearization, of course, naturally,
합의되더라도 진전이 되게 어려울 거고 합의도 아마 어려울 겁니다.
naturally,
그러니까 지금
for
담대한 구상이라는
right now,
것은
it's difficult to reach an
내놓은
agreement.
내용이,
The contents of the audacious initiative
필요하다는 그건 뭐
are necessary
부정할 수 없다고
in
봅니다.
some ways. I am not
다만
denying that.
북한의 비핵화 진도와 경제적 보상을
But
어떻게 연결할 것인지
How are we going to link the denuclearization progress with the economic support to
합의된
North
후에
Korea?
종착역까지 어떻게 갈 것이냐
How
모든 걸
will-
협상하는 과정에서
In the process of negotiating the roadmap,
협상 카드
we have to use this as
이거로
a
접근할지
card
모르지만은 협상 재개를
of
위한
how we
미끼로
will be
사용하기에는
providing the support.
이게 과연
But
적절하냐 하는
we should
것에
not be
대해서 문제가
using
의문이
the economic support as
대규모,
a bait for to
경제적
bringing
피해가
North
어느
back
단계에
to the
가서는
table.
반드시 필요하겠지만은
And of course, some kind of
이런
economic
경제
support
지원을
should be
비핵화 수단으로
recovered,
삼겠다는
but
그런 인상을 주게
we should
되면
not imply that we
북한은
are
그냥
using
무력화만
economic
느낍니다.
support
물론
as a
북한이
way
굉장히
to
좋아할 줄 생각하는 게 우리
pulling
생각이고
North Korea back to
북한 입장에서는
the
자기들이
dialogue.
천신만고
For North Korea, it will be too
이게
humiliating.
자기들
For us,
말로
it could be a good
신성한
idea,
체제를
but
지켜줄
for them, they are
모범으로
trying to
핵을
maintain their
만들었는데
sacred regime, and that's why they
돈으로 사겠다는
developed nuclear weapons.
남조선이 돈
But
많다고
and they
이걸
will think
가지고
like, oh,
완전히
so South Korea wants to buy our
우리의 이
nuclear
보금을
weapon with
갖다가
money,
고작 몇 푼
our
돈
sacred
따위로 이걸
weapon
인정하려고
that we
하느냐.
want, that we need to sustain our regime.
태도를 이 사람들 인식을 갖고
So we
있습니다.
should not imply such things.
자기들은 이거는 미국의 적대 정책, 고립 압살 정책 등에 대항하기 위해서
They
만들었는데
created
적대
nuclear
정책 개수,
to respond to the
미국에서
hostile
자기들이 말하는
policies from
체제
the U.S.
안전보장하고 바꿀 일이지 이게 무슨 돈 몇 푼에
This
흥정할
is
일은 아니다.
so
이런 생각이
for them.
있잖아요.
They
북한
do not
입장에서
want to
굉장히 모욕적인
trade their
제안이거든요.
nuclear weapons with the
모욕적인
hostility from the
북한이
U.S., not with some
반드시
kind of economic
거부하겠다 하는 걸
support.
계산하고 북한의 거부를 받아내기 위해서 제안한 거라면 그건 굉장히 저는 전략적으로 의미가
So,
있지만은
of course, if
그게
we
아니고 뭔가
are
북한에다가
taking more
회담에
strategic
나오는
way
방식으로
or
사용했다
approach,
그러면
that would be
저는
good.
별로
But
그렇게
if we
별로
use
효과가
economic
있을 거냐는 그런
assistance
생각이 좀
as a
듭니다.
bait to lure North
두
Korea
번째는
back
이게
to
이제
the negotiation,
컨텍스트,
then that wouldn't be a
시기
good
이런
choice.
측면에서 본다 그러면
And then against the backdrop
북한이
of
지금
the
벌이고
context
있는
of the
게임이
Korean
뭐냐?
Peninsula.
어,
So what
그리고
kind
앞으로
of
전개될
game
상황이
is
어떠냐,
North
이것도
Korea
생각을 해봐야
playing? And we
됩니다.
have to think of the
현
way
단계에서
the
북한이
course will
추구하는
take in the
최우선
future.
목표는
The goal
사용
of
가능한 핵무기죠. 사용
the
가능한
North Korea
핵무기를
is creating the usable
만들고
nuclear
핵무기의
weapons.
수량을 확대하고 기술을
and they want to
보호하고
expand the
당장은
quantity
전술에
of
개발하는
the weapons, and they want to develop
이게
their
사전 탐지
further develop
요격을 피할 수
their
있는
technology.
운반 수단.
And they
이거까지
want to
만드는 게
also
안보상으로
create the
필수적일
delivery
뿐 아니라
systems
이게
that can avoid advanced detection.
협상 재개에 대비해서도 이게 북한의 레버리지를
And
가장 그 강화시켜주는 협상
and this
자산이거든요.
is a
우리한테 위협이 많이
asset
될수록
for us.
그 사용
The more
가능성이
the threat
높을수록
it will
북한은
bring, the more usability it will have.
협상력이 커지는 겁니다.
The bigger card for the North it will become.
그래서 사전 탐지와 요격이 어려운 첨단 고체 연료 미사일을 많이 만들어서
So
다양한
they will be creating a lot of missiles that can avoid advanced detection, and they can use this as a way to respond to the U.S. hostility, and that will give them bigger card. This is
그래서 우리가
a
지금 어떤
good
제안을
thing.
하더라도
This is something
북한은
that the North wants.
작년 8차 당 대회에서
But no matter what we think, during the last year's 8th Party Congress, Kim Jong-un announced its new tasks and programs, and North Korea will adhere to those programs. At least, in my opinion, unless North Korea finishes the tactical nuclear weapon test, it will not return to the dialogues because it's already in a very favorable position. There's no reason for North Korea to return to dialogue. So first of all, they will want to secure some kind of measures that they can, with which they can attack both Korea and Japan, and only then they will return to the negotiation. So they will conduct their tactical nuclear tests, and then they will also launch their ICBMs. And then at the end of the sanction cycle, we will have some room for diplomacy. And we also have to think of whether it was right for the president to announce this initiative. No matter how great an initiative is, if we can foresee that the North will be against with something, I believe that the government should be more cautious of letting the president announce some plans. This will do not good to the reliability of the Korean government. Of course, it could have been better if the minister announced a plan. And then next, how will this initiative influence our negotiating power? Of course, it's good to invite North Korea back to the negotiation, but when North Korea has no intentions to talk with us, if we continue to persuading them to come back, and then if we continue saying, if you come back, we will give you some great surprises, then
시킬 뿐이지.
that will only
이게
solidify
협상력에
the
우리
North's
협상력에
stature.
도움이 안 된다고 봅니다.
It will not help us to
오히려
achieve what we
우리가
want through
대화를 위해서
negotiations.
기존 입장에서
And of course,
양보하거나
for our
후퇴하겠다는
own
그런
negotiations,
자세를
we
보이면
may
이건
show
본인의
some
이제
signs of
이렇게
concession,
더
for example,
많은 양보를 받아낼 수
and,
있구나 하는 그런 어떤
and then the
항상
North will think of some possibility
저는
of
이런 걸
giving
주기
up something for the sake of
협상이
negotiation.
재개된다 하더라도 이런
But
어떤 환상을 주는 게
if we
그
keep
협상
implying
진전에는 별 도움이 안 될 거라고 봅니다.
what we
마지막으로
have
이제
done until now, that will
정치
not help in progressing the
북한은 지금
negotiation
미국을
in
자기
any way.
카운터파트로 생각하잖아요. 북한의 지금 핵
And
문제 이거는
last but not
미국의
least,
대북
the
정책
DPRK
안전
thinks
보장하고 이건 거래할 사항인데
the U.S. as its
우리가
counterpart.
무슨 가진 카드는 물론 경제밖에
But
없죠.
of course,
그러나
for South Korea, the only
이거를
card that we have is the
공동의
economic assistance.
제안으로 하면 북한은 조금 그래도
If we
뭐
go hand in hand with the
관심 가질
U.S.
여지가 있을지
and
모르지만은
offer this as a possibility,
이게
then
우리가
the
이게 발표하는 거
DPRK we
이거는
will
북한으로서는
pay some kind of attention to this.
아무리
But if
솔직한
we alone
제안을
announce
하더라도
such initiative,
나중에
no
미국이
matter how
협상에
honest we
나가서
are,
어떻게 하나?
if
한미 간에 이게 같은
they
입장이
may
아니고
be
다를 수가 있다고
worried
생각하면
that
북한한테
the
도움이 안
the
될 수가
U.S.
있다
may
이런
have
생각을
some
할 겁니다.
other
나중에
stance.
예, 한국은 이렇게 이런 좋은 제안을 했지만은
So
미국은
the U.S.
나중에
may later
실제
say that,
미국하고
oh,
협상을
okay,
해요.
the
미국은
South
나와가지고
Korea said some
아니, 그건
good
한국이
things,
하는
but
이야기예요. 우리는
that's
그건
what
한국에다
the
물어보라.
South
그런 식으로
Koreans
이야기를
think, but we have another
아무 소용이
idea,
없게 되는
etc. Then everything will be
거기까지
to
이제
no
말씀을
avail.
드리고 좀 나중에 뭐 이야기할 기회가 많이
So
있겠지만
that's it, what I wanted to share.
우리가 그래서 해야 될 일은 그러면
So
아무것도 안
what
하고
do we
그냥
have to do now?
집중적으로
Should we
있을
just
것이냐.
wait and see?
대화 문은 아까 말씀드린 대로 예를 들면
As been said earlier, we have to keep the doors open for dialogue.
우리가 뭐 마다할 필요도
Of
없고
course, we should not be saying no to the
그러나
North's
지금은 대화를 위해서
willingness to
북한을
talk,
열심히
but
구애하고
we should not
그런
be
별
serenading
소용이
to
없을
the
거다 이런 생각이고
North for them to return to the
거기서
table.
아마 ICBM 실험까지는
The
가야
North
그다음에
will continue and
이
conduct
새로운
its
레버리지가
missile
협상에
nuclear
나와서
tests, and it
이게
will
값이
launch
얼마 나가는지
the
테스트를
missiles,
볼
and
텐데
only after that, I believe
그때까지는
they will
우리가
return to the dialogue.
북한의
But until then,
7차 핵실험 ICBM 발사 이후에 어떤 제재를 가할
we have to
것이냐.
think of what kinds of sanctions
이제
we will be
우리
posing on the North
미국과
after the
우방국들하고
DPRK
친밀하게
conducts
해가지고
its
괜히
seventh tests
그냥
and
큰 소리면
launches
진짜
the ICBM. We have
아무
to,
말 안
in
하다가
the meanwhile,
괜히
keep talking with the
북한의
U.S. and other allies about how we will respond
손익 구조를 바꿀 수
to
있는 어떤
the
그런
North's
카드를
actions.
지금 준비할 때다.
It's time for us to work
그것만
on
지금
developing
해가지고
our
나중에 아무것도
own
못하게
cards.
되면 별로 소용없는 거 하게 되면 또 웃음거리만 될 수가
No,
있거든요.
If we do
그리고
not
또
end up
하나
with
우리가 해야 될
anything,
게
we'll,
뭐냐면 미국에다가
people will
미국
just laugh at
내에서
us at the end of the day.
비핵화는 지금 거의
And
물 건너갔으니까
We all know that we are all pessimistic about the
북한의-
North
북한은
denuclearization.
사실상 핵 보유국으로 이걸
And
용인을 하자 하는 그런
There are even
주장이 전직 고위
talks
관리
that
지낸 사람들 입에서
among
나오고
the
있거든요.
high-level officials that, or former high-level officials, that we have to acknowledge the North as the nuclear country. And based on that, we have to talk about the next stages of talks. But we should not. We should prevent that from happening. We should not let that happen.
무장을 용인하겠다는 건 한국의 핵무장,
We
일본의
should.
핵무장,
So
이제
some say
모든
that we
나라의
have to
핵무장을
invite the
용인하겠다는
North,
이야기인데
acknowledge North at the
그런
nuclear
위험한
power,
이야기는
and then
우리
invite
정부
them into
당국자는
the
이야기하지
arms
않지만
reduction
전직
talks.
고위
But we
당국자들이
shouldn't
와서
let that
그런
happen.
이야기를 함부로 하는 거.
We shouldn't let the
이게 전부
former
다
high-level
비핵화
officials
의지를
talk about things like
약화시키는
this,
이야기들이거든요.
because
이건
that
좀
will
막았으면 좋겠다.
only weaken or wane the government's willingness for the North's denuclearization. That's it from my side. Thank you.
예, 오전 세션에 존
In the morning session, Professor John Mearsheimer actually mentioned
현실주의적 관점에서
his realistic perspective. He mentioned on the developments and the prospect of nuclear issue of North Korea. And he said that from North Korea's perspective, there's no reason for Pyongyang to give up on the nukes. It's because it is good for them to keep it. It's only rational for North Korea to maintain its nuclear program. And Chairman Chun just mentioned that from Pyongyang's perspective, this is not the time to talk. It's actually time for them to enhance their nuclear capabilities, and only after that will they engage in talk. Then in this regard, our audacious initiatives will be very hard to be effective. This audacious initiative includes the 3D. It is about dissuasion, deterrence, and diplomacy. And the time for diplomacy is not right now, like everybody understands that this is probably the time for deterrence and dissuasion. And in that regard, Chairman Chun's concern must be shared by the current government. Now I would like to move on to Professor Yoo Ho-yeol. He is active in academic society and research on unification and North Korea. So I would like to ask him to share his ideas on our foreign North Korea policy and the inter-Korean relations development. Thank you very much. This morning, I'm sure you've seen the articles that North Korea once again fired more than 3 missiles, and especially exceeding the northern limit lines to our side, causing concern. And now I am sitting here listening to the presentation of 3 of my colleagues, and I think to myself that after all this insight, what else will be remain for me to comment on? That was my concern, actually. These 3 gentlemen commented on the current situation that we find ourselves in, and the audacious initiative about North Korea, the content and the background and the problems of these initiatives have been well summarized by my colleagues already. So for me, as a scholar reviewing the unification issue, and so far whenever conservative parties are in power, I have served as the advisor to the government. So in my experience, I would like to, my capacity, I would like to make some comment. This morning, our foreign minister, Park Jin, also mentioned the meaning of global pivotal state. Global pivotal state, and the acronym of this is GPS. GPS is also has another meaning for locating oneself. The audacious initiative of our president also has some problems, as our colleagues explained. Audacious initiative is the mantra and the slogan of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. When this was reported, of course, I got many questions from other people, and I asked myself, what would be the audacious initiative? Why the audacious initiative? Why are we talking about it? Why has this become the focus of our North Korea policy? How is it different from Sunshine Policy, Vision 3000, and the peace process of past governments? Why should audacious initiative shoulder with these other slogans of past governments? Because the problem is, the thing is, locating oneself is not what you do. You have to understand where you are and pinpoint the point, pinpoint the place that you're in, or the place that you want someone to be doesn't really result in the actual location of the other person. You have to really understand and identify the objective location of the other party to be able to have the right policy. But our strategy about Pyongyang cannot be that way, because we don't know where Pyongyang stands right now. We don't know what they have pursued and what they want to pursue from now on, because that is not something one-dimensional.
또는 한반도 정세를 볼 때는
If you look at the Indo-Korean relationship and the international landscape, we start from the international landscape. We have to start from how the international landscape has been created. Now we are talking about the Indo-Pacific world.
가장 중요한 것 중에 하나는
As we talk about the East Asia landscape and the Indo-Korean landscape, we first need to understand how
북한이 있구나.
South Korea is faring today and where North Korea stands and what should we do and how we should approach
저는
this
담대한 구상이 나왔을 때 정말
it will be
깜짝 놀랄 정도로 이게 뭐냐?
will be formed.
나오냐?
When audacious
뭐냐라는
initiative
얘기를
idea came and I was really
듣고,
surprised.
의아해하고 제가 바라던 보수 정부가 들어서서
The Conservative Party came into power as I wanted them to be,
자유와 이 가치를
to
중심으로 한
strengthen the Chorus
나토의,
Alliance, Raucous Alliance,
하나의 역의 참여자로서
and become an out-of-area participant of NATO, contributing to peace and stability of the international community. As the government goes into that direction, the most important objective and our mission is North Korea, and I'm not sure if they really understood the current state and the landscape of North Korea. I was really surprised and
제가 지난 30년 동안
dismayed
북한
by
남북관계 통일을 쭉
this failure of understanding North Korea. As I researched North Korea issue over my career, looking at the regimes of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un, over this time they have been consistently pursued their program, nuclear program, and they've already declared the completion of their program, and recently they legalized this program.
김정은 또 김씨 정권이
As such,
존재하는 한은
as long as Kim Jong-un is alive and as long as the Kim family stays alive, 99%, they're not going to give up their nukes. When we try to locate Pyongyang or North Korea,
곳을 놓고 좌표를 추적해 들어가는 것과는
we have to understand whether it is possible for North Korea to give up its nuke or not possible at all.
어떤 그 본격화든
In trying to denuclearize North Korea, even though we divide them into different, more specific steps,
어떤 남북 관계를 한다면
if denuclearization is the basic foundation of our policy, then the entire direction of our policy is on the wrong direction.
과거에는 3차 방정식으로 얘기했거든요.
This North Korea policy is never one-dimensional. In the past, we say it was three-dimensional. The international landscape, East Asia, Northeast Asia, and inter-Korean relations. These three dimensions. But over time, the landscapes have turned
냉전 시대까지는
against North Korea, and very recently it is not as pessimistic as the time during the Cold War, but the time has turned very negative in the international order.
탈냉전기에 있었던 경제적, 정치적, 사회적 그런 위기를 나름대로 통제 강화를 통해서
For North Korea is actually maintaining their order as much as they can, and in that background, North Korea is actually completing their nuclear program. So we should no longer be treating and viewing North Korea as we would do in the past, because North Korea has already advanced from that. And this government, which stays only for 5 years, are trying to do something which is not going to work anyway. In this regard, I believe that this is truly unfortunate. When the government promotes these policies, the kind of policies that they committed during their campaign and during the transitional period should make sense, because recognizing the fact that 5 years is a very short time, and this government doesn't seem to understand or doesn't seem to recognize the importance of the limitations that the current government has in tackling the nuclear issue. Under this Kim Jong-un regime,
평화적인 방법으로 해결돼야 되겠지만
of course, the nuclear issue of North Korea should be solved peacefully, but we first need to have the premise in place that North Korea is not going to give up its nuke. Then, what are you going to do? How are you going to address this issue? We have to refer to the cases of other countries, and by reflecting on the current situation, we have to rely on the changes of the public, of the citizens of North Korea. Without that, there is no possibility for peaceful denuclearization of North Korea. Then what should we do? We should try to bring about the changes of the North Korean society and the people.
무력에 의한 북한 변화를 추구하지 않겠다라고 얘기하셨는데
Our president declared that he is not going to pursue using forces to denuclearize or unify. Of course, that is the correct way to go.
장관님도 말씀하셨지만
As
북한 사회가 가장 걱정하는
former
바이기도
Vice
하고
Minister
현실이
Hong just mentioned that the
북한의
biggest
청년
concern
세대들의
of
인식이
North
달라지고
Korea
있다.
is that the
인식이
young
다른
North
인식을
Koreans
하고
are
있다라고 하는데
changing.
주목해서
Their
그런 부분을 우리가 어떻게
sentiments are
남북
changing.
관계에서
That is North Korea's biggest fear.
활성화시켜
They are
나갈 수
trying to
있는가
learn the
하는 것이
freedom and
담대한
democracy
구상의
of
본질이
other
되어야
countries, which is
되는데
their
모르겠습니다.
biggest
그런
fear.
부분을
That
전략
should be
구상에서 한 정부가
the big idea, the big
포함하고
content of the
정책을
audacious
함께
initiatives.
구상하고
And
실행하고
I
있는지
truly
모르겠습니다만
wish that the
적어도
current government
북한 핵 문제와
puts
함께
focus
북한 체제의 변화,
on
그리고
that
남북 관계
content,
개선과 활성화를 위해서는
changing the
이러한
regime
부분에
of
대한
North
근본
Korea
전제,
and to change
근본
the
어떤
sentiment
인식이
and the
북한
understanding
체제가 현
attitudes of the
체제를
people.
유지하는 한 김정은 이 3대 세습
As long
체제의
as the Kim
독재 정권,
family
그리고
continues
엘리트층을
its autocratic
중심으로 한
leadership
북한
over three generations, and as long as the elitism and the dictatorship of North Korea's power remains as it is today, then it would be the realistic, whether we like it or not. And based on this premise, we have to change. We should be able to change our policy. We should be able to withdraw or change the policies realistically and practically. That would be what a government should be, especially as a only democracy in the world that has only one-term 5-year presidency. So as a one-term 5-year presidency country is actually a benefit for us. We should be able to do that.
유호열 교수님께서는
Yes, Professor Yu just mentioned that the arms nuclear denuclearization of North Korea is not going to be possible, and that is for sure. And our North Korea policy focuses too much on denuclearizing Pyongyang. Therefore, we need to be able to change North Korea so that it goes down to the way of denuclearization, and the current government is kind of missing on that. I actually was not very good in managing time. Time has passed a little more than I thought it would be, so we have only about 30 minutes left. So I have to be wiser in managing the time here. If possible, I would try to open the floor for questions from the floor and from online. So if you have any questions or comments from online or from the floor, you are welcome to comment or ask questions. So anytime if you have comments, please raise your hand, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. And in the meantime, I will ask more questions to the panelists about inter-Korean relationship and the nuclear issue. For former Vice Minister Hong Yang-ho, let me ask you a question. The current audacious initiatives is focused on denuclearization of Pyongyang. To achieve these initiatives, there should be dialogue and improvement in a Korean relationship. However, currently, North Korea is only interested in enhancing its military and nuclear power. And as President Chun just mentioned that North Korea is only looking at the US and not South Korea for dialogues. The position of focusing on inter-Korean relationship or to returning to Pyongyang and Washington relationship, which one should it be? In order to restore the inter-Korean relationship to the center, what should we do? So we have very limited time, so I'll give you only 34 minutes each.
시간이 많이 촉박하면 요점 중심으로 하겠습니다.
Okay, let me try to summarize and focus only on the important points. Based on my experience of inter-Korean relationship, I can summarize their features into three. The first, they focus on power. They look at which one is more powerful and who is weaker.
강화하기 위해서는 스스로 국방력을 강화하고
And in order to become more powerful, they focus on building their military capabilities and building their solidarity within themselves. And secondly, of course, they focus on military capabilities, but at the same time, they are also very apt in calculating their benefits economically. And thirdly, probably because they've been a closed country, they are very careful and suspicious of other people. The person that I am talking to right now, is he or she going to put our regime on a risk? And we say that although their military exercise, Korea-US military exercise is a defense exercise, are they not going to attack us when they're needed? Is there any hidden intention, hidden agenda? They're always thinking about it, they're always suspicious. And because of their features, we have to come up with the right approach that fits that. If you look at the inner Korean talks, or Washington Pyongyang talks, when do they come to the table? First, when they feel the risk, the threat, security, and number two, when they are so economically difficult, they need some help from outside. And thirdly, when there is politically and diplomatically pressure on North Korea, they come to the table. And number four, they utilize North Korea to actually get the attention from Washington. And number five, when they see that the game is going to be very beneficial for them through behind curtains talks, in these five circumstances will they come to the negotiating table? And this right now is not the time to exchange with North Korea because North Korea doesn't see any needs to do so. Then in these times, what should we do? We have to have three kind of approaches corresponding to their three features. The first is strengthening Korea-US alliance and solidarity. And number two, strengthening the solidarity to Europe. And number two, at least maintain China or Russia, stay neutral, or at least not support North Korea's position. And as I said, North Korea is very apt in calculating their economic benefits. So we will have to come up with an idea that will be very beneficial, economically beneficial to North Korea. But South Korea should not work on its own. Maybe it can work with Japan and the US, so that North Korea doesn't approach South Korea alone. And in order to give them the trust and to make sure that they do not stay suspicious to us, we have to open a channel that we can have a direct exchange to Kim Jong-un, so that Kim Jong-un believes himself that this is actually a reliable channel. We should not be approaching any officials that are below Kim Jong-un. We have to have direct communication with Kim Jong-un. And considering this is not the right time to move, so we should be just providing incentives. And when the right time comes, which means that when North Korea really sees the need to talk, or when we believe that we need the talk, we should find the right time to move. And
정말로
when we believe that
지속적이고
the right time has
조직적이고
come, then we have
이렇게 해서
to
북한을
move the very
접근해야 된다고 저는
in a
그렇게
very
생각합니다.
organizational
그런 측면에서
and
지금은 뭐
meticulous manner.
강대강으로 갈 수밖에 없는 국면의
And this
강대강으로
is the
가지만
time where
때가 왔을 때는 우리
where
정부는
the inter-Korean relation is only
감면적으로
responding power with power,
접근해야 되고
but
또 정부 단독으로 할 것이 아니라
when the right time
북한의
comes, we have to use both
추구하기
hardline and
위해서
softline policy, a
정부와
mixture of
민간이
hardline and
올란도
softline.
플레이로 나가는 그런 방향을
And the
세워야 되지
government
않을까,
and the private
그렇게,
sector should
말씀을
work
드렸습니다.
together
시간이 없기 때문에
using the
이제
same
마치도록
voice.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you.
남북 대화는 우리가
The inter-Korean dialogue, even if we yearn for it, it's not going to happen just because we want it so hard. When the North needs it, it will come back to the table. And how can we make such an environment? We have to think about it all the time and keep the doors open. And we have to strengthen ourselves so that when the time arrives, we can drive the North Korea to the right corner and engage them into a dialogue with us. And then let's move on to Professor Yoo Ho-yeol.
제가 알고 있기로는 크게 세 가지의 목표가 있습니다.
Our North Korea policy has three objectives. Our North Korea policy pursues three values: unification, peace, and security.
그런데 박근혜 정부는
The
통일을 가장
Park-geun
중시했던
administration
것 같고요.
focuses
각별하게
on
통일을 중시했고요.
unification
그리고
most.
문재인 정부는
Moon Jae-in
각별하게
administration put
평화만,
priority on
평화를 아주
peace
중시했던
and
것
peace
같습니다.
only.
우리 이번 정부는
And the
또
current
각별하게
government
안보에 강한 강점을 두고
puts
있습니다.
strong
그런데 저는 이
priority
세
on
개를 다
security.
버릴 수는 결코 없다고 봅니다.
These three
그런데 지금
are
가장
all
큰 문제는
important.
통일에 대한
And
관심은
the biggest
급격하게
problem
줄어들고 있다는
is the
것입니다.
interest and the attention to unification is getting weak, especially the young South Koreans look at inter-Korean relationship as two different countries and two nations. And in this situation, is it okay to leave the unification issue as it is now? Should we do something to get more attention to unification and the need for unification? A very big topic, but I can give you only 3 minutes. Sorry for that.
예. 30년 전에 제가 그
30 years
민족통일연구원
ago,
처음 창설됐을 때 91년에
in 1991, when I joined the Democratic Peace Research Institute, when foreigners visit us, they ask us, "Why do you try to unify the country?" Most people will ask us that. But for us, is that even a valid question? It's just a natural call for us to pursue unification. We talk about and think about how to achieve unification, and they want to introduce them. But foreigners, other people would ask us, why do you want unification? 30 years fast forward. Now, many Korean people actually think the same way. According to a survey that is done by the same research institute, only 4 out of 10 respondents wanted unification.
KBS에서 매년
And
조사하는
another
설문조사를 보면
annual survey done by KBS
60% 정도만이
showed that only
통일을
60%
원한다
of
이런
Korean
얘기를
public actually
그만큼
want
이제 우리에게 있어서
unification,
통일이 참
which
관심
shows
밖의
that
영역이 되고
unification has
있는데
become
더군다나
a
이러한
weak
부분이
interest
정부의
for
어떤
Korean
그,
people.
주도적인 역할로 할 수 있는 시대가 지나갔기
And
때문에
especially
이런 부분에
because
대한
now
그
the government
어떤
can no longer
각성이라든지
lead this
문제의식 이런 게
attention
필요한 것입니다.
to unification. That is why we need to increase the awareness about this importance. If the Indo-Korean relation becomes a relation that we are we and you are you, then the tension will actually become diffused a little bit. But actually, that is not the case. Unification is a cause, a natural cause that we should definitely pursue, and it's actually good for us. It will be beneficial for us. That is why the government will have to pay more attention and pay more efforts to bring the public's attention towards the importance and the necessity of unification. Currently, many private consultative bodies are just scattered around, they're fragmented.
그런 부분에 대해서는 비교적 우리 정부도 중요성을 인식하고 적극적으로
So the government needs
조직도
to
하고 활동도 합니다만은
of course, the government is making efforts
움직이지 않으니까라는 인식 때문에 그런지
about the inter-Korean relations, but when it comes to unification, maybe because North Korea is not moving, or maybe because the publics are not interested in it anymore, the government is not making much efforts. The unification ministry or the committee that I just mentioned, or the public and private partnership that used to be there in the past, building on these experiences, the government and the private parties, the private actors should remind ourselves of the need for unification. And that should work as the premise for our efforts to improve the inter-Korean relations
통일이라는 관점에서
and
바라보고 통일을 위해서
embrace
다시
the
한번
problem,
동력을
the current
결집할 수
problem
있는
of
그런
the
노력을
sour inter-Korean
정부
relation as
차원에서
the real
특별히
problem because we
기울여야
want
되니까 그런
unification.
부분에 있어서 또 한번 아쉬움을 이제 함께 전하고자 합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you.
그다음은
And
천영호
next,
수석님께 좀 질문을 드리고자 합니다.
Mr.
현재
Chun.
북한의 핵 위협, 미사일 위협이
So the
아주
nukes,
커지고
the
있습니다.
North's
그러다
nuclear
보니
threats
국내에서
and the missile threats
굉장히
are
큰,
exacerbating,
쟁점이 하나
and
생겼습니다. 한국도 핵무장을 해야 된다는 것입니다.
many people say that Korea
그래서
should go
한국이 자체
nuclear
핵무장을
as
해야
well.
된다는 그러한
And there
여론조사에
are,
따르면 70%가
according to a public survey, about 70% of the respondents said that we should also develop nuclear weapons. But nevertheless, it is a very difficult task to achieve. Is it even possible at all? And
핵무장을 하자고 주장하거나
even if we assert that we want to adopt tactical or strategic nuclear weapons, they say that the U.S. nuclear umbrella is broken, and they say so because they are doubting the U.S.'s willingness to keep supporting us. So since you have a conservative point of view, but still you have very progressive idea as well, I would like to ask you whether we can keep trusting in the U.S.'s nuclear umbrella. I am not conservative, and people criticize me for being too progressive.
독사 핵무장 이야기하기 전에 우리
But
핵탐론 이야기하기 전에
when we talk about, or before talking about going nuclear,
공장원 차관님이 충분히 설명했지만 제가 거기에 대해서 간단히 설명드리면
I want to talk about whether
북한의 운명을 결정할 수 있는
about
힘과
this.
의지
So,
가장 큰 힘과
what is the biggest? What is the country that has the power and willingness to stop the U.S. The North? It is the U.S.
잘 지내지 않고서는 우리
Without being close friends with the U.S.,
운명 이게
you may put into a danger the survival of your own country. That's why you have to keep talking to the U.S. But
대화에 관심이 없느냐?
why isn't the
우리가
North interested in talking to us? Because we, South Korea, are not as strong as the U.S. in terms of determining the North Korea's
뭐 미국
future.
못지않은
But it doesn't mean that we have no power at all.
힘과 수단과
We do
수단이
have
있는데
measures, we do have
의지가
means,
없으니까 그
we
사람들은
do have the
의지가
power,
없으니까
but we
우리가
have
생각할
no
필요가
will.
없는
That's why the North is not turning to us. So what means do we have? The
이게
biggest threat
대한민국
of North Korea,
K-팝 같은 게 들어오는
or to
한국으로는
North Korea, is
이
the
대한민국의
Korea's
문화 바이러스가
pop
북한
culture
체제를
virus,
붕괴시킬 수 있는 그런
because the
위험이기
K-pop
때문에
culture
안정세상 문화
is
배격국으로
capable
만드는
of
거고
bringing down the
옛날에
North Korean
그냥
regime.
그저 지도 정도 할 걸 가지고 5년 이상 형을 살리고 하는 이런 형법으로 다스리고 하는 게
So,
이게
and they
북한 체제를
are punishing
위협하는
people
가장
for
위험한 요소니까
for
그렇거든요.
listening to the
그래서
K-pop
이호일
war,
교수님도
etc.
이야기했지만은 결국 북한 체제를
So,
흔들고
to shake the North Korean regime
변화시키고
and to
진정한
transform
체제를
it
흔들 수 있는
and to shake the Kim Jong-un regime,
우리의 문화 바이러스인데
we do have a cultural
협박으로
power-based
협박에만
capacity.
지난 정부에서 협박을 해가지고 굉장히 재미를 봤죠.
But
그러니까 이거는
even we have this in our hands, but if we keep just threatening the North, that's not going to work. If we just keep showing strong stance, then they will respond not in the way that we want.
회담할 필요가 없는 겁니다. 회담보다 겁주는 게 더 효과적인데
So-
뭐 때문에 우리하고 회담하자 그러겠어요?
North will not be willing to talk to
우리가
us. It
지금,
will just keep threatening
북한의
us.
음포 한마디에 굴복하고 이렇게 되면 북한은
So
우리하고
if we just
대화를 통해서 해결할 일이 없습니다.
keep agreeing to
협상만
North
가지고
whenever
해결하면
the
됩니다.
North threatens us, then the North will never come back to the dialogue.
우리가 그런
But
협박에 굴하지 않고
if we never give
계속
up
북한에 무슨
and
정보를 유입하고
if we keep sending in current information
위해서 우리가 뭐 국가 정책으로
and
적극적으로
if we
우리
keep
문화를 유입시키고
taking
외부
policies,
정보를 유입시킨다.
measures
그러면
to influence the awareness of the North Korean youth, then the North Korea will come and talk to us. That has happened since the Lee Myung-bak administration.
그리고
We have
전단
been
살포 이런 걸
in psychological combat with the North,
단속 안 하면서부터 북한이
and ever since we stopped regulating the sending of the
하도 스토킹을 해서 몇번 만나긴 만났어요.
leaflets to North Korea. North Korea has been calling us to stop
아, 이렇게
sending
하니까 자기들이
those.
협박해서 아무리 해도 안
So,
되니까
and they realized that them threatening us didn't do any good to them. So they keep asking us to meet with them, to talk with them. So I think this has some implication to all of us. And about going nuclear, I have a reason for being against it.
근본적인 문제가
And the fundamental issue of this nuclear discourse
억지에
is
지금
that
포커스가 맞춰져.
we are too focused on deterrence.
본질적인 문제는
The fundamental or essential issue of the North nuclear is that deterrence can fail. For other nuclears, deterrence can work. It can work against China, India, and Russia. But if we look at the essence of the North Korean regime, the deterrence failure, the moment of deterrence failure will arrive. So North Korea is fundamentally different from all other nuclear countries. For the North, in order to sustain its existence, in order to lessen any possibility of the regime failure, it has to keep its nuclear. When its regime is the brink of failure, then it will use the nuclear. And the North is the only country to which such idea is applicable. But the U.S.'s extended deterrence will work only to deter the North Korea, but when the moment of deterrence failure arrives, even that will have no impact. Then what kind of stance should we take against North Korea? We should focus on denying North Korea's use of nuclear weapons. We should not deterring it, because when we deter it, it means that we acknowledge that North Korea has nuclear weapons. So instead of deterring it, we have to focus more on denying North Korea's nuclear weapons. Whether that's about going nuclear ourselves or something else, deterrence failure will never arrive because our deterrence has worked. But deterrence failure will arrive no matter what we do, and at that moment, North Korea will be using its conventional weapons. First of all, we'll have to eliminate all those conventional weapons and all the missile launching platforms can be eliminated or intercepted using the missile defense network. But whatever we miss, we will
우리가 지하 어떤 쉘터 이런 거를
be
보강해서
utilizing our
하고
underground
거기에 대피하는
shelters
훈련 이런
in
걸
order to
통해
evacuate
가지고 우리가
our
안보에
people.
이태원 사건 같은 이런 걸 막을 수가 있다.
Only then we can stop the
그런 면에서
North
제가
Korea's
저 핵을
attacks.
반대하는 거고
So
미국에
in such way,
그리고 아까
I am
지금
against the
전
North
박사님 말씀하신 미국이
nuclear.
저
But
LA나 뭐 뉴욕 이런 게 공격받을까 싶어서 북한에다 핵을
the
사용하지
US,
못할 거다 하는 이 우려는
there are concerns that the U.S. will not be using the nukes against the North Korea because North Korea may attack LA or other cities in the U.S. That's out of the question.
미국의 동맹국이라면 그런 리스크도 좀 미국이 고민을
Of course,
하겠지만
North Korea, the U.S. may be concerned about such risks, but
북한의 핵을 공격받을까 겁이 나가지고 그 확장 억지 공약을 지키지 못한다면
if any country
미국의
cannot
모든
adhere to its
나토
extended
회원국과
deterrence
전
because
세계
it's
모든 동맹국에 대한
fearing
방위력은
North Korea,
신뢰성을 상실합니다.
then the U.S.
미국의
will
동맹
lose its
체계는 다
credibility
파괴되고 다
among
해체가
all
되고
its
미국은
allies.
미국은 뭐
Then
동맹이 이제 동맹 체제가 다
the
파괴되는데
alliance systems
북한같이
will
핵을
break down
수십개
in that
가진 그런
case.
집단이 핵 사용할 때 반드시 핵으로 응징한다는 걸 보여주는 것이
So the
다른
U.S. will
미국의
be
동맹국에
demonstrating
미국의 확장
to
억지에
all
그
its allies that
credibility를
whenever
높이는 게 저는 절호의
its
기회인데
allies
저는
are
그런
attacked
기회를
with
미국이
nuclear,
놓칠 거라고
it
생각하는
will
거는
also
기회라고
respond with
생각합니다.
nuclear. That's a way for the U.S. to strengthen
Yeah,
its credibility among its allies.
보통 그 억제라고 할 때는 이론적으로 두
When
가지가
we say
있는 것
deter,
같습니다.
I think there are
Deterrence
two:
by denial,
deterrence by denial or
retaliation인데
deterrence by
북한은
retaliation. And for North
디터되기가
Korea,
어려운 수도 있으니까 북한이라는
deterring North
체제는
Korea may
그렇기
be
때문에 디터런스 바이 디나이얼을 더
difficult.
강화해야 된다는 측면을
Therefore, we have
말씀하셨고
to focus on
미국은
deterrence by
한국뿐만 아니고
denial
자기
for
모든
Pyongyang.
동맹국에게
And
해구산을
another
제공하는데
is that
만약에
Washington will provide
한국에
all
해구산을 제공할 때 실패한다면
allies its
그 미국의
umbrella, and if
동맹국들은
it fails to
결국
provide the
핵무장할
umbrella
것이다.
to Seoul,
과연
then
미국이
all
원하는
the
것인가?
allies, Washington's
미국의
allies, will
체제를,
arm themselves with nukes.
리드하는
Is
국가로서
this something that
원하는
Washington
것인가라고
looks
했을
for?
때는
It's
미국의
not the case.
한반도에
And
대한
he says
한국에 대한 해구산도
that
굉장히 굳건할 것이다. 이런 말씀을
Washington's nuclear umbrella for
해주셨습니다.
Seoul will be
지금
very
저희들이
strong,
시간이 딱 10분 남아
according to
있습니다.
Mr. Chun Young-woo.
그래서 다시
We
한번
have
우리가
only
저
10
전영희
more minutes to go, so
기획단장님께
we'll give the
기획단장님께
microphone to Mr.
말씀을
Chun Young-hee
부탁하려고 하는데요. 혹시
of
제가
MOFAT.
당초에 조그마한 질문 하나 준비했습니다만은
Actually,
그것보다는 혹시
prepared one
전반적으로
more
하신 말씀
question,
오늘
but
또
other
논의된
than
것에
my
대해서
question, would you
뭐
like to
좀,
make a comment on the
보완을
discussion so
하거나,
far? You'd like to make a
반박하실
complimentary
필요는
comment?
없겠지만은
You don't have
보완을
to
하거나
refute
보충할 말씀이
any
있으면은 좀
comments,
준비를
but if
해주시고
you have
그 전에
complimentary comment, please do so.
여기 오늘
And before that,
참석하신 분들께서
I'd like to
질문할
open
게
the
있으면
floor
저희들이
for
지금 질문을
questions.
받도록 하겠습니다.
If you have any questions,
어떤
please
질문이나 의견이나
raise your
좋습니다.
hand. Comments are also welcome.
생각할 시간을 드리고요. 없다면
So I'll give you some time to
넘어가도록
think
하겠습니다.
of the comments
하시라도
or questions.
손을 들어
Any
주시기 바랍니다.
time
현재
you have
10분이
questions,
있으니까
please raise your hand. We have 10
전영희
more times to go,
단장님께서
so
한 3, 4분,
Mr.
한
Chun,
4, 5분 정도
you can
쓰시고
spend
그리고
about
여기
3 or
계신
4
분들께 한
minutes, and
1분씩의
then
발언을 드리고
I'll
저희
give
회의를
each
끝내도록
speaker
하겠습니다.
1 minute
전영희
each before we
부탁합니다.
close. Mr. Chun, please.
네, 고맙습니다.
Okay, thank you.
지금 다른 차관님들이나
Just like other professors and the former vice minister said,
리어 샤이너 교수까지 참석해서
and
좀 현실주의적인
I
관점에서 한반도 문제
got a lot of insight, and also Professor Min Sharma had a very good
다들 뭐 걱정도 많으시고 의견도 많으신데
discussion
저도
about
사실
the current
공감합니다. 개인적으로
situation
이
in
북한
the Korean
문제가
Peninsula,
30년
and
동안
there are a lot of
사실
concerns,
쉽지
and
않았고,
I am
그리고
concerned as
우리
well.
정부가 바뀌면서
The
여러
North
정책도
issue
바뀌고
has
또
been
다양한 시도를
a
했습니다.
huge issue for us for the past 30 years,
대화도
and the
여러
different
번
governments
있었고,
have
또
taken
나름대로
different measures
합의나 합의도
to
있었지만 또
respond,
지켜지지 않았고.
and there
그래서
have been
비핵화가
agreements that were
중심이 되어야
breached,
된다는 거는
and
한반도 아니고 북한의 비핵화 완전한 비핵화가
the complete
우리 정부의
denuclearization
확정 정책이라는 거는 변동이 없다라는 걸 말씀드리고요.
always remains as the solid policy for or goal for the current
이전
government.
좀 차이점도 있고 여러 가지 말씀드렸지만
And
담대한 구상이
the
지금
audacious initiative is different from the previous other initiatives.
아까
But
정 교수님 얘기하셨겠지만
just
그
as
3D
Professor
정책,
Chun
소위 말하는
said,
디터런스나 디스웨이션이나
we have the
다이얼로그 이런 게
3D strategies.
담대한 구상의 어떤 초기 단계로서 다 포함이 돼
which
있는
is
지금 3D
a part
나름대로
of the
전략을 하고
audacious
있는데
initiative.
북한이
It's
워낙 도발을
the
하고 있기 때문에
initial
많은
part
도발을
of the
했지
audacious
않습니까?
initiative,
그래서
and the North
상대적으로
Korea
디터런스
is
또 미국과의
conducting
확장
acts of
문제라든지
provocations,
어떤 국방 안보
and
차원의 문제 이런
there are
대비에 조금 초점을 맞출 수밖에
So we
없고
have to
그리고
focus more on the
국제사회라든지
national security
유방국이라든지
against that backdrop.
유엔과 또
And we
어떻게
must
이제
cooperate
북한에
with
대한
other
제재와
international
압박을
community
가할
members
건지에
and the
대해서도
UN,
협의할 수
and we
있는
have to talk
그
to
다만
such
이제 북한이
other
어느
actors
순간이 되면
about
또
how
대화에
we'll
나올
be
수 있기 때문에
posing
이런 계획에
sanctions
대해서
against the
충분히
North. And
대비하자라는 차원에서
in the sense that we have to prepare to the next stages when the North Korea is ready. We have developed this audacious initiative. Of course, I didn't develop the whole initiative all by myself, but we have paid close attention to the current status or situation in North Korea, and we also pay attention to the pandemic situation. And against all this backdrop, considering all these elements, we have developed the best possible rational initiative, which is the audacious initiative. And of course, we still have a way to go. But in order for us to achieve this initiative, we need a more genuine approach or genuine attitude from the North. And the Korean Peninsula is in a way going the direction the North Korea wants. But the international community should keep working to break the North Korea's commitment to keep its nuclear. And of course, to this end, we are providing different kinds of assistances, including the food assistance. And of course, there is economic assistance, but in addition to that, we have other elements for discussions like recovering the relations with the U.S. and the arms development, the conventional arms development, and such military elements are also included in our initiative. But since we haven't made any further steps in negotiating with the North, we couldn't bring these elements into the table yet. But for the future negotiation, we have to prepare some kind of policy, and that's why we have developed audacious initiative that seems like the most rational and realistic measure for us at the moment. And even if the North goes against this, we will not be giving up this initiative or reviewing it in other ways. So, and once again, I want to say the audacious initiative includes in itself the 3D strategy. And as we said earlier, we will keep showing our will and our deterrence in order for us to not be dragged to the way that the North wants, and so that we can create the conditions for the dialogue with North Korea. And that's why the Ministry of Unification, the Ministry of National Defense, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are working together. And that's why the U.S., Japan, and the ROC are cooperating. And the U.S. supports our initiative and understands our stance. And if we do resume the discussions or negotiation with the North, the U.S. will be main counterpart for the North. And against this backdrop, we developed the most realistic and rational initiative, which is the audacious initiative. And of course, I cannot go into much more detail. I try to draw an overall picture, so to explain that if the North comes back to the table, we can suggest more bold suggestions, and we can show more rational stance, and we will be taking this stance. So to achieve a complete denuclearization of North Korea, the Korean government will keep working to this end. Thank you.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. John.
그러면은 청중에 계시는 우리 이충면
Now,
우리 외교안보연구소 소장님께서
we would like to
의견을 좀
ask
코멘트
Mr.
해주십시오.
Tamyang to
예,
give some comments.
세분 패널리스트 말씀을 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you for the three panelists for their insights.
홍영호 차관님하고 유호 교수님
Vice Minister
또
Hong Young-ho and Professor Yoo Ho-yeol,
뭐 천영 대사님
and
항상 대선배로서
Ambassador Chon Young-ho.
인사이트풀한 그런 저 코멘트
As a senior diplomat,
여전히 그런
you
코멘트
always
주셔서 후배로서 많은 것을
part,
배웠다는 말씀을 드리고요.
insights
그
to
저는
your
이제
colleagues, and we learned a
약간
lot from you
저
today
관점이
again.
다른 거를 하나 이야기하고
I'd like to
싶은
make
게
a comment from a
세
slightly
분께서
different
이제
perspective. The three
앞으로
panelists
외교적 방법에 의한 협상이
mentioned that
개시되기 위해서는
to start a
그
diplomacy
어떤 객관적인 여건이
based
성숙해야 된다.
negotiation,
아직은 아니다라는
the situations and the
취지로
requirements for such
객관적인
diplomacy
측면에서
should
이렇게 말씀을
be prepared.
하셨는데
That is from a very
제가
objective
이렇게
perspective.
그 개인적으로 조금 우려스러운 것은
But what I am
만약
very
협상이
personally
시작이
concerned about is,
됐다 하더라도 넘어야
although
할
we
아주 중요한
start
허들이 하나 있다라는
we
생각이
start the
듭니다.
negotiation, there is
주관적인
still a
측면에서.
very important hurdle that we need to
지금
overcome.
말씀하셨지만은 반복되는 학습 효과에 의해서
As you
북한이
said
결코
that
핵을 포기하지 않을
Based
것이라는
on
게
the learnings that North
상당히
Korea
많은 국민들 사이에
has,
공감이 되고
North
있고
Korea is never going to give up on its
국제사회에서
nuclear program
쉐어되고
as agreed
있습니다.
by the international
그런
community, including
학습 효과에
Korean
의한
people.
그런 확신, 북한이
The
결코
kind of conviction
핵을
that we
포기하지
learned
않을
from
것이다.
past
또
history that North Korea
계속되는
is never
좌절,
going to
이
give up on
협상이
its
계속돼
nuclear
왔습니다.
program,
정부를
and the
바꿔서
continued failure,
또
the
한국
negotiations has
정부의
been
어떤
pursued by
이념적인
a
색채를
series of governments,
다른 정부가 들었을 때마다도
regardless
계속
of
협상이
the
계속돼 왔고
political
미국 정부도
posture
마찬가지고
of South Korean
Democratic
governments, and
and
the same
Republican
for
뭐 계속
North
그 협상이
Korean
진행돼
government,
왔는데
the
계속
Washington government, whether it be
반복되는
Democratic
좌절이
or
있어왔습니다.
Republican, they
그렇다면
pursued
지금 또
dialogue
다른
and
협상이
diplomacy, and
시작되었을
they
때
continue to fail.
그렇게 예전처럼
Then, if
바로
we
진입이 될
start the
것이냐
negotiation
국내
and
여론 또
dialogue
국제
first,
여론이 이런
will
심리적인
we
허들을
have
어떻게
the
극복해서
support from
협상에
from the
돌입하고 또
public,
협상의
Korean
결과에
public and
대해서
international public? How are we going to
그 주인을
surmount
확보할 것이냐,
the
이게 공감대를 형성하고
psychological
동력을
hurdle?
확보할
How are you
것이냐
going to
하는 게
bring about
지금
a sentiment that
북한의
support
핵이
this
새로운
new
단계에
rounds of
접어든
negotiation?
만큼
Since North
이전과는
Korea's
차원이
nuclear
다른
program
느낌을
has
가지게
gone to
되려고
another
합니다.
level,
그 이전에는
now the level of
단순하게
nuclear
말하면
program and the dialogue was
정부나
different
뭐
from
정부가 미국과
the
이렇게
past.
협의를 해서
In the
협상을
past,
진행하면
the Korean government
그렇게
talks to the
국민의
U.S. and
동의라든지
starts a
국제사회
dialogue with
공감을
North
얻는 게
Korea,
그렇게
and
어렵지 않았다고
getting the
봅니다.
approval from the
협상
Korean public and the
자체가 가진
international
필연성,
opinion
또
was
이런 것
not
때문에.
so
그러나
difficult because
앞으로
they
뭔가
recognized the
협상이
necessity
이루어지면
of dialogue.
그거에 대한
However,
국민적
from
공감대,
now
제가
on,
말씀드린
if
두
we
가지
try to
주관적인
start
효과,
another round of
반복된 학습 효과,
negotiation,
북한이
because
결코
of the
핵을
two
포기하지
effects that I just
아니라는
mentioned, the first is the
그리고
learning from history,
repeated
that
frustration,
they're never going to
계속되는
give up,
좌절에
and the
따른
other is the
그런
repeated
좌절감, 이 두
failure.
가지 주관적 요소 때문에
Because of these two
어떤 국내적인
subjective
공감대,
elements,
국제적인 공감대를
the
그 협상에 대한
domestic
공감대를 얻는 게 쉽지 않을 것이다
approval
하는 게
and the international
제
approval for new
느낌이고요.
round of
이건 답이 없는 문제긴
negotiations may
하지만 그런
not
국내적
come our
공감대,
way.
국제적 공감대를 얻을 수 있을 것인지 얻기 위해서는
And in order to
뭐가
get this
필요한 건지
approval, what do we
이게
need
좀 답이
to
없는
have?
문제긴 하지만 좀
I'm not
답을
sure if
좀
you can really
부탁드립니다.
answer this question, but can you try?
좀 답을 드리고 싶은데
I
지금
want
시간이
to give you
너무
an
많이
answer,
되어서
but
저희들이
since
거의 마무리를 해야
we
될
are out of
시간입니다.
time, it's time actually to
이에 대한
wrap
답변도
up.
좋고요. 아니면
Of course, it would be great to give some answers to the comment, but actually we are out of time right now.
이게 뭐 송출도 있기 때문에 끝을 내야
Since
되는데
we are
저희들이 한 25
live
분까지
online,
좀
we
한 30분
have
정도 최대한 한번
we are
끝내도록
given
하겠습니다. 어떻게 혹시
3 more minutes.
말씀을 안 하셔도 되고 혹시 한 말씀 하시려면
So if you would like to comment, the last comment, then please.
예예.
예.
예 그러면 예.
저 우선
Of course,
이충만
I'll go
소장
first.
저 질문
Mr.
답이 없다고
Lee
했는데 그래도
Chung-myung,
답을
you said
내놓으라고
that
하니까
there is no
한마디만
answer, but
하면,
since you want an answer, let me say one thing.
비핵화 굉장히 거의 불가능하다는
Denuclearization is impossible. I am not denying that.
가능성은 시간이 갈수록 줄어들고
And the
있습니다.
possibility of
북한이
denuclearization is weakening with time.
능력이 진전될수록
With the stronger nuclear technology that North has, the possibility of denuclearization is waning even more. But when can we achieve the genuine denuclearization?
정권을 내놔야 될 때,
It will happen when
정권의 생존과
the
비핵화 간의
North
양자택일할
regime.
상황으로 우리가 몰고 갈 수 있을 때,
So when we
그때
can
가능하다고 봅니다.
make the North to choose between its
김정은이가
regime
핵만
and
가지고는
nuclear,
저희
then
앞으로
only then we
5년,
can achieve
10년은 그것만 가지고
denuclearization.
밥을 굶으면서 버틸 수가 있는데,
Of course, the North Korea
30년,
can
40년,
survive
50년
like for
하는
5
거는
or 10 years
경제
without,
발전
you know,
없이는 아마
any
핵만
food
가지고는
or economy,
저 체제가
but
유지가
it
되기
cannot
힘들 겁니다.
sustain its
우리가
regime without
북한이 핵을 내놓기
economy
전에 우선
for
경제
like
발전
3, 4, 5
기회를
decades.
박탈하고
So
거부를
first
하고
of all, we have to
거기다가
take
아까
away
뭘
the possibility for
그
economic development
교수님
from the
말씀하신
North,
여러 가지 북한
and
체제를
then
변화시켜주는 또 우리 수단이 있으니까
we
그
should
수단을
take
총동원하고
measures to change the North Korean
핵을 안
regime
내놓으면 정권을
in a
내놔야
full-blown
되는구나
way.
하는 확신을 가지도록
And then we should
손익 구조를
make
핵
the
무장의
North
손익 구조를
choose
바꾸는
between
외에는
the
뭐
regime
답이
and the
없다.
North,
그렇게
and only then we can achieve
말씀을 드리고
denuclearization of
그
North Korea.
한마디만 더 핵무장론에
And if I may add
관해서
one more thing about going nuclear,
우리가 핵무장론에 해독돼 있는 사람들이 보면 말이야.
a lot of people
핵은 선제 사용이
only see the
불가능하다는
rosy
걸
picture
잊어버립니다.
of nuclear development.
북한은 핵 선제 사용하는데 아무 도덕적 정치적 부담이
For
없습니다.
North
북한이
Korea,
핵
they
선제
can
사용할 수
preemptively
있다고 해서
use nuclear. They have no
명분이
moral or
대한민국이
moral ethical issues
핵
about that.
가지고 있다고 선제 사용할
But
수 있다는 게
even if we do have nuclear weapon, we cannot use it
속도에
preemptively
얽매일 수밖에
because
없습니다.
we are relying on the civilized society's rules.
선제 사용은 미국 그 확장
Who can
억지라는
use
것도 선제
preemptively?
사용을 못하는 겁니다.
Not even the
북한이
US.
핵을 사용했을 때
Only
대량
when,
음성
only
보고하는
if
걸
the
사용할 수 있는데
North
왜
uses
지금 우리는
nuclear,
사람이
other
수만 명
countries
죽고
can use
나서
nuclear only in response to
어떻게
that.
좋은 사후 약방문 만들 것이냐?
So we are just
양간을
thinking
어떻게
about
소일고 나서
fixing
근사하게
a problem
없앨
only
것이냐?
after
이게
the
지금
problem
골몰되어 있는 얘기입니다.
occurs. We should not be thinking about
북한이
that kind
사용
of
못하게
approach.
하는 데가 지금
We should just
저 전략을 모든 우리의 그
not
노력을
allow
집중해야
the North
되지.
use the nuclear.
북한에 핵 맞는 거는 당연하게 여기고
So we should think that we should not acknowledge the North's nuclear and then stop it from using it. We should just not allow the North have the nuclear from the beginning.
20년, 100년 가도 핵을 만들지 말라는 거냐? 핵 무기는 안 만들더라도
So even if
우리가
we do not make the nuclear weapons,
근본적인 안보 상황이 바뀌면
if the fundamental
핵을 만들 수
security
있는
issues
기술력은
change,
갖고 있어요.
then
농축 R&D를 해야 돼. 농축 시설은 갖고
so
있어요.
we should keep
평소에
developing the
우리가
technology that
평화적
will allow
목적에
us
농축
develop
시설은 갖고
nuclear
있어야지.
issues,
지금
the
너무
enrichment
너무
technology.
공허하기 짝이 없는
So just in
이야기거든요.
case the time arrives for us
그래서
to
지금
develop something,
왜냐하면 이게 트럼프 같은 사람이 미국 또 대통령이
if
나오면
another Trump
반동맹
happens in the
대통령이 나오면
US,
동맹이
who is
어떻게 될지 모르겠는데
anti-alliance,
그런 상황에 우리가 그런 상황에 대한 하나의 인슈런스
so we have to be insured against such thing. We should have some kind of technological capacity to be insured from things like that.
저희들이 시간이 많이 되어서
So
죄송합니다만 그냥 마감을
It's
해야
time
될것 같습니다.
to
아마 저
close the
준비해 오신
session.
말씀도 많으실
I
거고
am
아마
sure
우리
that our
우리
panelists
청중들
have more
많은
things
의견이
to
있을
share,
것을
and I believe that there are
시간이
more
많이
questions
있습니다.
from the floor, but
우리
unfortunately
정부가,
we do not have more
담대한
time for
구상에
that.
따라서 추구하는 3D
So the
3D
Korean
의,
government is
대북
pursuing the
정책은
3D strategy
북한의
under its
핵위협에
audacious
대한
initiative,
그리고 북한 비핵화
which is
외교를 위한
composed
대응,
of
그리고
deterrence,
남북 관계
dissuasion, and
개선, 그리고
diplomacy
한반도의 안정을 위한 대응이 포함되어
to
있는 복합적인
achieve
대응
the stability
정책입니다.
on the
아마
Korean
이러한
Peninsula.
것들을 상당히 유연하게
We should
활용할 것으로
utilize
생각합니다.
these strategies in a more
한반도의
flexible
상황은,
way.
더욱더 나빠질 수도 있다는 것이
We
오늘
have to
회의에서
keep in
나온,
mind, as was
내용이었던
mentioned,
것
that the
같습니다.
situation in the Korean Peninsula
우리는
may
북한에게
worsen in the
금방
future.
말씀하셨듯이 북한에게
Just
새로운
as
세법을
was
요구하고
mentioned,
있습니다. 너네들 정권은
the
그렇게 해서 너네들의 핵무장으로는
the North is asking from us a new way or of approach and attitude. So the North Korea is demanding new approaches from the US and from Korea. So now we are engaged in the combat of will. So against this backdrop, we need more wisdom in our North Korean policies. With this, I would like to close the third session of the IFAN's Conference on Global Affairs. I would like to thank the panelists for their participation and contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor John, and thank you everyone for insights. Now it is time to close the 2022 IFANS Conference on Global Affairs. Hope you had a great time joining our panel discussions. On behalf of IFANS KNDA, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for being with us today. Wish you all the best and hope to see you again next year. Thank you.